Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, for another Insane Manga Corner. Bro, it's been like over a decade, it feels like. Do you even think people remember what this series is? Yes, I'm very much aware you didn't have to bring it up. I'm just saying it just feels like a waste of time to say Insane Manga Corner, like people know and are well established with this franchise of videos you didn't even do that often and haven't done in like an absurdly long amount of time. No, I'm perfectly aware of the situation. I just feels like you're just trying to undercut me for no good reason. Hey, don't get mad at me. That's your part for being lazy. Because it's still a part of the channel. Maybe the hardcore fans remember it, and that's the reason why they would remember. I think it's a nice nod. You didn't have to bust me out like that. The only reason why he's doing this, by the way, is because he hasn't been watching anime, but he's been reading manga, so, you know. You gotta get the people something, am I right? Whatever. The point is, we're back, ladies and gentlemen, with another Insane Manga Corner. So, with that being said, let's get into it. So today's Insane Manga Corner will be about a Shonen Jump series because, you know, that's like my bread and butter. Today's Insane Manga Corner will be a Shonen Jump title that doesn't have an anime, and well, it's gotta be on the new series Kagurabachi. This has been like the premier title in Shonen Jump for like the last year. Everybody's been talking about this. Everybody's been excited about this. I mean, for God's sakes, this thing got memed as soon as it came out. It's gotta be Kagurabachi. Today, we're talking about Ultimate Exorcist Kiyoshi! Oh no, my face is flaying to the red. Yeah! Ultimate Exorcist Kiyoshi was created by Soichi Usui, who biggest claim to fame is that he worked under Oda for like 5 years. Actually, the recommendation for this series above literally came from Oda himself. He was like, hey, I think you do a good job. And I'm gonna be real with you, the Oda influence is definitely felt. See, our boy Kiyoshi here looked like a pretty cool, badass guy, all the tattoos, the piercings, and everything. He's pretty cool. The biggest problem Kiyoshi has is that he has crippling anxiety. The way he's introduced is the Ultimate Exorcist. Yes, it's another Exorcist manga. And for all intents and purposes, he's pretty good at his job in terms of exorcising demons. The problem is because he has social anxieties and incredibly shy and nervous, it very much feels One Piece inspired just off of the way it bounces between its action and its comedy. Kiyoshi is a strong ass dude, kind of like how Luffy is at the beginning of the series, but he's incredibly goofy because he's socially awkward. Hell, the first chapter has him struggling to exorcise a demon, not because he can't do it, but because he's terrified. Actually, he has to get pep talked by the demon in order to even gain a sense of confidence. And that's kind of where its strong suit sits. It's a very good balance between comedy and action. I think one of my favorite things about this series is just the way one of my favorite things about this series is the fact that how well it's drawn. It's like this cool action. I like the hard lines and these actions, little set pieces. He has an array of fucking exorcist moves and cool hand poses and gestures and stuff. And I think the way the panels are drawn out and laying out in terms of organization is very clear and appealing to the eye. But if you were to ask the Shonen Jump rankings how well it's done, considering it's been going on for a little bit over a year now, I think if you had to say there's 20 spots in the ranking, obviously 1 being the best, 20 being the worst, I think Kiyoshi usually averages out around 11 or so. It goes sometimes it'll have chapters that hit 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s. And then you got other chapters that hit like 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. I think it's even had 1 or 2 20s in there. It has about 5 volumes out, and I guess it's sold well enough because usually a series that is trash would get killed before it even gets to its first year. There's a couple other series that are in here that a lot of people are going to notice and be like, oh God, that's still going? But I really like Kiyoshi. I think the biggest problem Kiyoshi has, and it's actually a problem Shonen Jump has, we have a lot of duplicate mangas currently. But I think we have 2 Hitman shows with Sakamoto Days and Kill Blue. We got 2 Exorcist shows with Kiyoshi and News Exorcist. And we have 1 magic show with Ichi the Witch. We have One Piece, obviously, and a decent chunk of like slice of life / sports shows. Now granted, some of these are kind of newish, so they haven't been around long enough to say whether or not they're worth it. But my rule is that if it has at least about a year's worth of chapters, we'll properly talk about it, because needless to say, if you stick around for a year, you're mostly safe unless you go out on your own terms. So yeah, but Kiyoshi's running joke with being socially awkward kind of only really works for the first handful of chapters, and part of the reason why I think the show jumps up and down on the ranking so much is because we'll go from chapters of him trying to make friends to chapters of him in essentially a Forest of Death ripoff fighting demon dogs or whatever, and I don't think for some people that works consistently enough. I also think the way Kiyoshi rocks is kind of like how One Piece rocks, where it needs a build up of chapters and then you get your payoff, and those are usually the chapters that do well overall in terms of rankings. I think it generally is a fun show to read. The biggest problem it tends to have is it also struggles with its characters. So Kiyoshi himself is fine. I have really no issues with Kiyoshi. It actually reminds me of Fire Force. Parents got killed by a demon, so he dedicated his life to learning how to be a demon hunter, aka a Fire Force rep. Essentially, my parents were killed, so I jumped into the profession to stop others from suffering in the same way. Pretty basic standard stuff. He even became the top of his class. But of course, you can't have someone who looks like a badass and also is socially well off. So that's where he struggles. I think there are a lot of good jokes with it and a lot of cool, like, funny. It actually, in some ways, reminds me of One Punch Man in a lot of ways, too. That, like, man, he looks so cool. He's ready to fight. Actually, if anyone's watched One Punch Man and watched King's whole premise is that he's like this insanely strong hero, but he's lying. But no one can tell because his aura is so strong. He aura forms naturally. So as a result, no one can tell that he's bullshitting. Kiyoshi is like a variation of that. He's actually really, really strong, but he's so socially screwed that it makes it hard for him to make friends. Not saying he doesn't make friends, I'm just saying he struggles at it. I think as far as his side characters, whether it's his friends, his fellow exorcists, or his rivals, that's where things get kind of shaky. Not to say that they're bad, but they're definitely not really fully developed. The problem is because of how Kiyoshi handles himself as a series, what we get is a lot of like comedy moments and then serious moments, and sometimes you miss the emotional depth. Now, that's not saying it doesn't have it at all. What I'm saying is that Kiyoshi sometimes fluctuates between being like super action heavy and then trying to have moments. The problem is I think the him trying to have moments thing takes away from what people like about the series. I think people like the action and the violence, and the character designs are absolutely amazing. It's very One Piece inspired just off the character designs alone. You have characters who can go from looking absolutely ridiculous to absolutely badass. And I'm like, you got that art on lock, buddy. You got that art on lock. But then people don't seem to care as much about the emotional moments of trying to connect with these side characters. Partially because there are sometimes not payoffs for it, or we haven't gotten far enough into the series to see said payoffs. So what you end up getting is a series that looks cool, but doesn't have as much depth as they want it to. And when you do try to add depth to it, well, then it's not funny anymore, and they want the comedy. I feel like it's constantly caught in between itself, and it's struggling to lock itself down to gain that strong fan base. I think if it is allowed to continue and the mangaka wants to continue it, because we just finished a major arc in the manga, literally today, actually, as I'm recording the video. If the series continues, I think it'll be one of those slow burns that over time it'll gain a fan base. I think the other problem it definitely suffered from is that early on, you kind of didn't have a crazy interesting plot. We were essentially doing, we got to defeat all of these demons, specifically these high-ranking demons. Cool. The problem is Kiyoshi's out here killing demons in like one shot. He's one-shotting everything. So you don't really get to feel a grind or whatever. The first time you see a grind is pretty much when you deal with the big bad of the arc early, because you know we gotta do that stereotypical I gotta get my ass whooped first before the series actually like takes itself seriously. And I think people like that struggle. I mean, when you think of some of the bigger hits out of Shonen Jump in recent years, whether it's even Kagurabachi does it, you got what, My Hero who did it, Black Clover did it, Jujutsu Kaisen did it. You want to see your main character struggle a little bit. The problem is because it kind of fluctuates in its gag era, you get a lot of sequences where Kiyoshi is just like, My biggest problem isn't beating the demon. My biggest problem is just getting there on time or finding out where to go. Very much One Piece where like Luffy can beat the villain, but we gotta dick around in the middle of the arc for a little bit for Luffy to get to the villain to then start the fight and then hope the fight doesn't get interrupted by something nonsensical. It's a very give and take situation, but I very much think that this series deserves your time and potentially money, although I don't think the manga's been licensed in the States yet. I'll double check and put it in here if it has or it hasn't. But honestly, it's only got 5 volumes out and we've already done a good chunk of an arc. So hopefully I'm hoping next week we'll start off a new arc because I think it deserves to keep going. And to me, even if you're only getting middling scores, if you're not in the bottom 10, don't count my boy out. He's trying. A lot of people, y'all gonna get mad that I'm not talking about Kagurabachi. And I like Kagurabachi, but I also don't love Kagurabachi. And I think Kiyoshi is probably the closest manga series I've gotten in the last few years that has had me like genuinely hooked ever since I was watching like My Hero or Black Clover. I'm not going out and reading raws of this thing yet, but it's on that tier. It's getting up there. If given enough time and he's able to flesh out his characters more and do some cool power-ups that doesn't just involve Kiyoshi, be kind of cool. Depends on what the next arc does, if we get one. I hope we do. But hey, seriously, go check it out. It's on the Shonen Jump app. The latest chapters, I believe, are free. Obviously, you pay for the longer ones, but it's 56 chapters. And I think right now is probably the best time to get into it, considering we just finished the major arc. So even if it doesn't continue, you have a good chunk of content to ingest. I hope it does. If it doesn't already, I don't think it does have an English serialization. And if it does, and I hope it really does get it, because I think it deserves it. I can definitely see the One Piece influence. I see a little bit of One Punch Man influence. And, you know, maybe next time we'll talk about the next Exorcist series that is something different. That's all I'll say when it comes to the other Exorcist series we have currently in Shonen Jump. It's different, all right. So, yeah. Anywho, this has been your boy, the Insane Game Freak. Life is indeed a game. Put a win. And I will catch you all later. Peace on. No. Ugh.